The drums stopped without warning, and the silence that followed felt heavier than any sound. Elena Voss stood at the center of the stone courtyard, surrounded by hundreds of pack members who had gathered for what they believed was a night of celebration. Torches burned along the walls, throwing long shadows across the crowd. She had worn a pale blue dress that night, chosen because Damon once said it reminded him of the sky over the northern ridge. She had not known, until this very moment, that he had asked her to wear it, so the whole pack would remember exactly what she looked like when he cast her aside. Damon Blackthorne climbed the steps to the raised platform slowly, his broad shoulders squared, his jaw tight. He did not look at Elena, he looked past her, toward the crowd, as though she had already become something he no longer needed to see. "Pack of Blackthorne," he said, his voice carrying easily over the courtyard. "I called you here tonight to speak the truth, even though the truth is not easy." Elena felt her stomach tighten. Something in his tone was wrong. It was too formal, too rehearsed. This was not the voice of a mate preparing to honor his Luna. This was the voice of a man preparing to end something. "For many months, I have carried a secret," Damon continued. "Vivian is carrying my child." A wave of gasps rushed through the crowd like wind through dry leaves. Elena did not move. She felt the eyes of the pack shift toward her, felt the weight of their shock and pity pressing against her skin. She kept her spine straight, refusing to let her knees betray her. "I cannot deny my own blood," Damon said, "and I will not raise a child outside of the bond of Luna. Effective tonight, Elena Voss is no longer my Luna. Vivian will take her place." The words landed like physical blows. Elena's wolf, curled quietly inside her chest for years, let out a silent whimper that only she could hear. The mate bond, the invisible thread that had connected her to Damon since the night they first met, cracked down the middle. She felt it happen, felt something inside her chest tear away, and yet she did not fall. Vivian stepped onto the platform then, wearing red, a color Elena had never dared to wear at a pack gathering, because red was reserved for a Luna's most important nights. Vivian's hand rested on her stomach, and her lips curled into a smile that was not quite triumphant, not quite kind. It was the smile of someone who had won a long, quiet war that Elena never knew she was fighting. "I know this is sudden," Damon said, finally turning to look at Elena. His eyes were not cruel. They were worse than cruel. They were indifferent. "But the pack deserves an alpha who is honest. I am sorry, Elena. This is what must happen." Elena's throat burned. She wanted to scream, to demand an explanation, to ask how long he had known, how long he had lied beside her at night while carrying another woman's secret. But 3 years of training as Luna had taught her control, and control was the only thing standing between her and complete collapse in front of everyone she had once sworn to protect. She lifted her chin. "If that is your decision, Alpha, then I will not fight it in front of the pack." A murmur rippled through the crowd, some in surprise at her composure, some in quiet admiration. Damon blinked, as if he had expected tears, or pleading, or rage. He got none of those things. Elena turned, and with steps that felt like walking across broken glass, she made her way down from the platform and through the parting crowd. No one reached out to stop her. No one dared, not with the Alpha watching. But as she passed, she caught glimpses of faces that did not look at her with scorn. An older woman near the back, Elder Whitfield's wife, pressed a hand to her chest as Elena passed, a silent gesture of sympathy. A young guard named Colin, barely 20 years old, lowered his eyes respectfully instead of following the crowd's curious stares. These small moments were the only things keeping Elena upright as she walked out of the courtyard and into the dark trees beyond. She did not stop walking until the sounds of the celebration behind her had faded into nothing but wind and distant birdsong. Her hands were shaking now that no one could see them. Her breath came in short, uneven pulls. She pressed her palm against the trunk of an old oak tree and let herself finally feel the full weight of what had just happened. Rejected, in front of everyone, replaced by a mistress carrying her mate's child. She thought of the years she had spent learning pack law, healing rituals, border negotiations, all so she could be worthy of the title Luna. She thought of the nights she stayed awake with sick children in the healer's den, of the mornings she rose before dawn to walk the borders with the patrol teams, learning every warrior's name, every family's history. She had given herself fully to this pack, and in exchange, she had been discarded in a single sentence. A twig snapped behind her, and Elena spun, her wolf instincts sharpening despite her exhaustion. It was Marcus Hale, a retired warrior who had once served under her late mother, Grace Voss. He was older now, his hair more silver than brown, but his presence still carried the quiet authority of someone who had spent decades protecting others. "I saw what happened," Marcus said gently. "I am sorry, Elena." "Everyone will be sorry for me now," Elena said, wiping her face quickly, ashamed to be caught with tears drying on her cheeks. "That is worse than being hated." "Being pitied is not weakness," Marcus said. "It only becomes weakness if you let it stop you." He studied her for a long moment. "Your mother once told me something, the night before she passed the Luna title to another. She said the throne does not answer to marriage, it answers to worth." Elena frowned. "The throne?" "The old Luna throne," Marcus said, gesturing toward the deeper part of the forest, where the trees grew thick and ancient. "It sits in the sacred grove, untouched for 3 generations. Legend says, it does not simply belong to whoever an alpha chooses, it chooses for itself." Elena had heard stories of the throne as a child, whispered tales meant to entertain young pups before bedtime. She had never imagined she would one day walk toward it with a broken heart and a shattered bond, searching for something that made sense of the pain twisting inside her. "Show me," she said quietly. Marcus nodded, and together they moved deeper into the trees, leaving behind the sounds of celebration, leaving behind the courtyard where her old life had ended, walking toward a grove that had not answered anyone's call in longer than she had been alive. The path narrowed as they went, the moonlight filtering down through a canopy so thick it turned the forest floor silver and blue. Elena's bare feet, still in the delicate slippers she had worn for what was supposed to be a joyful evening, moved almost without her direction, as though something ahead was pulling her forward. "How much further?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, afraid to disturb whatever silence lived here. "Not far," Marcus answered. "The grove does not let just anyone find it easily. The fact that we are moving this smoothly tells me something already." Elena's chest tightened at his words, though she was not sure whether it was hope or fear building inside her. She had been so certain, only an hour ago, that her life as she knew it was over. The idea that something ancient and powerful might still have a use for her felt almost too fragile to believe. They stepped through a final curtain of low branches, and the grove opened before them. It was smaller than Elena expected, a circular clearing surrounded by trees so old their trunks had grown wide as houses. In the center stood the throne, carved from a single piece of dark stone, its surface etched with symbols Elena did not recognize, symbols that seemed to shift slightly when she tried to focus on them directly. Vines curled around its base, and moss softened its edges, evidence of the decades it had sat here, waiting. "It looks abandoned," Elena murmured. "It has been," Marcus said. "No one has approached it since your mother's time, and even she never sat upon it. She always said she was not the one it was waiting for." Elena stepped closer, drawn by something she could not name. The night air around the throne felt different, charged, as though the grove itself were holding its breath. She reached out a trembling hand, uncertain, and let her fingers brush against the cold stone. The moment her skin touched the surface, a faint light bloomed along the carved symbols, pulsing gently like a heartbeat. Marcus inhaled sharply behind her. "Elena," he said, his voice tight with disbelief. "Do you feel that?" She did, a warmth spreading up her arm, settling into her chest, exactly where the mate bond had cracked only an hour before. It did not heal the wound Damon had left in her, but it filled the empty space with something else entirely, something that felt like recognition, like the throne had been waiting, patiently, through years of silence, for exactly this moment. "What does it mean?" Elena whispered, pulling her hand back as the light slowly faded. Marcus stared at the throne, then at her, his expression unreadable. "It means the elders need to know what just happened here, tonight." Elena looked back at the stone, its symbols now dark and still again, as though nothing unusual had occurred at all, but she had felt it. She had felt the pulse of something ancient recognizing her, in the same hour that the pack she had devoted her life to had cast her away. Whatever this meant, Whatever came next, Elena understood one thing clearly as she stood in that quiet grove. Her story was not ending tonight, in humiliation. It was only beginning, in a place no one, not even Damon, could yet imagine. Elder Whitfield's hands trembled as he listened to Marcus explain what had happened in the grove. The old wolf sat in his private study, a room lined with scrolls and record books dating back generations, his face pale in the candlelight. Elena stood near the door, still in her blue dress, feeling strangely exposed under the weight of his stunned silence. "The throne has not responded to anyone since before your mother's time," Whitfield finally said. "Not even to her, and Grace Voss was the strongest Luna this pack has ever known." "I did not ask it to respond," Elena said. "I only touched it." "That is exactly the point," Whitfield replied, rising slowly from his chair. "The throne does not respond to requests. It responds to truth, to worthiness, that already exists, whether the person carrying it knows it or not." He studied her carefully, the way a healer studies a wound, to understand how deep it runs. "Tell me, Elena, do you know the old law regarding the Luna throne?" Elena shook her head. She had grown up hearing the throne mentioned in old stories, nothing more. "Long before alphas claimed the right to name their own Luna through marriage," Whitfield explained, "the position was decided differently. The throne itself judged worthiness, drawing from bloodline, character, and the needs of the pack. Over time, as bonds between mates grew stronger and more trusted, the tradition faded. Alphas began naming their mates as Luna without the throne's involvement, and it has remained silent for so long that most in this pack believe it no longer holds any power at all." He paused. "Clearly, they are wrong." Marcus leaned forward. "What happens now?" "Now," Whitfield said carefully, "we watch, we wait, and we say nothing to the Alpha until we understand what this means. If the throne truly has chosen Elena, even in some early or partial way, it could create serious conflict with what Damon has already declared tonight." Elena felt a chill settle over her despite the warmth of the room. "You mean Damon could see this as a threat?" "I mean," Whitfield said gently, "that ancient law and modern authority rarely sit comfortably together. Be patient, Elena. Let us learn more before anyone acts." She nodded, though patience felt like an impossible thing to ask of her after the night she had just survived. She thanked the elder and stepped back out into the cool night air, Marcus following close behind. Meanwhile, across the packlands, the courtyard celebration had shifted into something far more intimate. Damon led Vivian into the Alpha's private quarters, the same rooms Elena had shared with him for 3 years. Vivian's eyes swept across the space greedily, taking in every detail as though measuring how quickly she could make it her own. "You did well tonight," Damon said, though his voice lacked the warmth Vivian had hoped for. "The pack will need time to accept this." "They will accept it because you are their Alpha," Vivian said, sliding her hand along the back of a chair Elena used to sit in every evening while reading pack reports. "And because I am carrying your child, what choice do they have?" Damon frowned slightly at her tone, but said nothing. He was still turning over the events of the evening in his mind, still replaying the image of Elena's composed, dignified exit from the courtyard. He had expected anger, he had expected tears. Instead, he had seen something that unsettled him more than either of those reactions could have, a quiet strength that made him question, for just a moment, whether he had made the right choice. He pushed the thought away quickly. It was too late to reconsider now. The announcement had been made. Vivian was carrying his child, and pack law was clear about what that required of him. "You seem distracted," Vivian said, studying him. "I am only tired," Damon replied. "It has been a long night." "For all of us," Vivian said, though her smile suggested she had found the evening far from tiring. She walked toward the window, looking out over the dark trees where, unknown to either of them, Elena had just discovered something that could unravel everything Vivian believed she had won. The following morning, word of Elena's rejection had spread through every corner of the packlands. Some members whispered with sympathy, remembering her kindness during difficult winters, her patience with young pups learning to control their first shifts, her steady presence during pack meetings when tensions ran high. Others, eager to align themselves with the new Luna, began fawning over Vivian, offering gifts and compliments, in hopes of securing favor before the child was even born. Elena spent the morning in the small cottage at the edge of the territory that had once belonged to her mother. She had not lived there in years, having moved into the Alpha's quarters after becoming Luna, but something had drawn her back to it last night, after leaving Whitfield's study. The cottage still smelled faintly of dried herbs and old parchment, remnants of her mother's healing practice. She sat at the small wooden table, staring at nothing, replaying the sensation of warmth spreading through her chest when she touched the throne. It had not erased her pain. The mate bond, though cracked and weakened, still pulled at her in quiet, aching moments, a phantom reminder of what she had lost. But beneath that pain, something new had taken root. A question. What if her value to this pack had never truly depended on Damon at all? A knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. She opened it to find Nora, a young healer's assistant who had trained under Elena during the past 2 years, standing nervously on the step with a basket of bread and dried fruit. "I heard what happened," Nora said quietly, glancing over her shoulder as though worried someone might see her here. "I wanted to make sure you were eating something." Elena felt a rush of gratitude so strong, it nearly brought tears back to her eyes. "Thank you, Nora." "You didn't have to." "I wanted to," Nora said firmly. "You taught me everything I know about healing wounds that others thought were too far gone to save. I have not forgotten that." She hesitated, then added, "Not everyone in the pack agrees with what the Alpha did last night. More people than you might think." Elena invited her inside, and the two women sat together over the simple meal, speaking quietly about small things at first: the weather, the healer's den, a young pup who had finally managed his first successful shift the week before. It was the first normal conversation Elena had experienced since the humiliation of the previous evening, and it steadied something inside her that she had not realized needed steadying. As Nora prepared to leave, she paused at the door. "Elena, may I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you think you will leave the Packlands now? Start somewhere new?" Elena considered the question carefully. A week ago, the answer would have been simple. A rejected Luna, stripped of her mate and her title, had little reason to remain among people who had watched her humiliation without intervening. But the memory of the throne's light pulsing beneath her palm made the answer far less certain now. "I don't know yet," Elena said honestly, "but I don't think I am finished here, not quite yet." Nora smiled, a small but genuine expression of relief. "I hope you're right. This pack needs someone like you, even if the Alpha cannot see that right now." After Nora left, Elena remained at the table for a long while, thinking about Whitfield's warning to wait, to be patient, to avoid acting until they understood the throne's meaning more clearly. Patience had never been difficult for her before. She had spent years being patient, careful, diplomatic, always thinking of the pack's needs before her own. But something about last night's events had shifted a piece of her that she suspected would not settle back into its old, quiet shape so easily. She thought of her mother, Grace Voss, a woman she barely remembered clearly, having lost her when Elena was still young. She thought of the strength Whitfield described, a Luna so respected that even the ancient throne had noticed her, though it never called her to sit upon it. What made someone worthy enough for the throne to notice, yet not enough for it to act? Perhaps, Elena thought, the throne had been waiting all along, not for her mother's generation, but for hers. That evening, as the sun dipped low over the Packlands, Elena rose from the table and walked to the small mirror hanging on the cottage wall. She studied her reflection for a long moment, the woman who had been publicly discarded only a night before, the woman whose mate bond had cracked in front of hundreds of witnesses. She looked tired, she looked hurt, but beneath the exhaustion, she saw something else too, something steady and unbroken. She was still Elena Voss. Whatever else had changed, that much remained true. Outside, unseen by anyone in the cottage, the wind shifted through the trees toward the sacred grove, carrying with it the faint, distant hum of something ancient, stirring back to life after a very long sleep. The ceremony hall had never looked so bright. Gold banners hung from the rafters, freshly cut flowers filled every corner, and the scent of roasted meat and sweet wine drifted through the open doors. Vivian stood at the center of it all, dressed in deep crimson, her hand resting on her rounded stomach as pack members lined up to offer their congratulations. It had been only 2 weeks since Elena's rejection, but Damon had insisted on moving quickly, eager to solidify Vivian's place before any doubt could take root. "You look radiant," said one of the pack's wealthier families, bowing slightly as they passed. "The child will be strong, just like the alpha." Vivian smiled graciously, though her eyes remained sharp, calculating, watching every face in the room for signs of disloyalty. She had waited a long time for this moment, longer than anyone in the room realized, and she intended to enjoy every second of it. "Thank you," she said smoothly. "I only hope to serve this pack as well as it deserves." Behind her, a small cluster of servants moved quietly, refilling cups and clearing empty plates. Among them was a young woman named Ivy, who had once worked directly under Elena during pack festivals. Ivy kept her eyes low, careful not to draw attention, though her hands trembled slightly as she poured wine for Vivian's guests. "You!" Vivian snapped suddenly, turning toward her. "Your hands are shaking. Are you incapable of a simple task?" The hall grew quiet around them. Ivy's face flushed with embarrassment. "I apologize, Luna. I will be more careful." "See that you are," Vivian said coldly. "I will not tolerate carelessness in my household." She turned back to her guests with a bright smile, as though nothing had happened, leaving Ivy standing frozen with humiliation. Marcus, who had been observing quietly from near the entrance, exchanged a glance with Elder Whitfield across the room. Neither spoke, but both understood the same thing. Elena had never once raised her voice at a servant, no matter how small the mistake. She had built loyalty through patience and respect. Vivian was building something else entirely, and the difference was becoming impossible to ignore. Later that evening, as the celebration wound down, Damon found himself standing near the balcony, overlooking the packlands, a cup of wine untouched in his hand. He should have felt triumphant. He had secured his child's future, elevated the woman who had captured his attention during a difficult period in his marriage, and silenced any public objection to his decision. Instead, an uneasy weight sat in his chest that he could not quite explain. "You seem troubled, Alpha," came a familiar voice from behind him. Elder Bennett, one of the oldest and most respected members of the Pack Council, stepped up beside him, his weathered face calm but observant. "I am simply tired," Damon said, echoing the same excuse he had given Vivian weeks before. "Tired men do not stare at empty courtyards for half an hour without moving," Bennett said. "May I speak plainly, Alpha?" Damon nodded, though something in him already braced for words he did not want to hear. "The Pack respected Elena Voss," Bennett said, "not because she was your mate, but because she earned that respect through years of service. Vivian has been Luna for 2 weeks, and already I have heard 3 complaints of harsh treatment toward the staff, 2 disputes over unfair judgments in minor pack matters, and 1 warrior who refused outright to acknowledge her authority during patrol assignments." Damon's jaw tightened. "Who refused?" "That is not the point I wish to make," Bennett said patiently. "The point is this. Leadership is not simply a title given by an alpha's word. It must be earned through action, and so far, Vivian has shown little interest in earning anything beyond what she believes is owed to her." "She is carrying my child," Damon said, his voice sharper than he intended. "That alone gives her a place in this pack's future." "It gives the child a place," Bennett corrected gently. "It does not automatically make her fit to lead thousands of wolves who depend on wisdom, patience, and fairness from their Luna. I say this not to challenge your authority, Alpha, but because I have served this pack for 40 years, and I have watched leaders rise and fall based on whether they understood this simple truth." Damon said nothing for a long moment, staring out at the dark tree line beyond the courtyard. Somewhere out there, Elena was living in her mother's old cottage, and though he refused to admit it even to himself, some small part of him wondered how she was faring, whether she hated him now, whether she had already begun rebuilding a life that no longer included him at all. "I appreciate your counsel, Elder Bennett," he said finally, though his tone made clear the conversation was over. "But my decision stands." Bennett bowed his head respectfully and said nothing further, though the concern in his eyes remained as he walked away. Meanwhile, at the edge of the pack territory, a small group of warriors had gathered near the training grounds after their shift ended, speaking in low voices among themselves. Colin, The young guard who had shown quiet respect to Elena on the night of her rejection stood at the center of the group. "I don't care what anyone says," Colin muttered. "I won't call her Luna the way I called Elena Luna. It doesn't feel right." "Careful," warned an older warrior named Griffin. "Words like that reach the Alpha's ears faster than you'd think." "Let them," Colin said. "I've served this pack since I was 16. I know the difference between a leader who earns loyalty and one who demands it. Elena earned it every single day. Vivian demands it, like it's owed to her, simply for existing." Several of the warriors nodded quietly, though none dared say it as boldly as Colin had. The tension in the group was clear, a slow, simmering discomfort that had nothing to do with disrespecting the Alpha's authority, and everything to do with the growing sense that something about the new Luna simply did not fit. Griffin lowered his voice further. "Have you heard the rumors from the sacred grove?" Colin frowned. "What rumors?" "They say the old Luna throne responded to someone recently, lit up like it hadn't in generations." Griffin glanced around to make sure no one else was listening. "My cousin works in the Elder's quarters. She says Elder Whitfield has been meeting with Marcus Hale almost every night since the rejection ceremony." Colin's eyes widened slightly, though he kept his expression carefully neutral. "That's just an old legend. The throne hasn't worked in decades." "Legends don't start meetings between elders and retired warriors," Griffin said. "Something is happening. I don't know what, but I intend to keep my eyes open." The conversation shifted then to safer topics, but the seed of curiosity had been planted among the warriors, small and quiet, yet steadily growing. Word of an old prophecy stirring back to life had a way of spreading through a pack faster than any official announcement, no matter how carefully guarded the secret was meant to be. Back at the cottage, Elena spent her days settling into a rhythm that felt strange, yet strangely peaceful. Without the responsibilities of Luna weighing on her schedule, she found herself with time she had not experienced in years. She tended to the small garden behind the cottage, where her mother had once grown healing herbs. She visited Nora at the healer's den when she could, offering quiet assistance without claiming any official role, and every few days, without quite admitting to herself why, she found her feet carrying her back toward the edge of the sacred grove. She never entered fully, not since that first night. She simply stood at the tree line, watching the distant shape of the throne through the branches, feeling the same faint warmth stir in her chest whenever she drew close enough. It was not painful, not overwhelming. It was steady, patient, as though something ancient understood she was not yet ready to return, and was content to wait until she was. One afternoon, as she stood at her usual spot near the tree line, Marcus found her there, his expression troubled. "Elena," he said, "I think it is time we spoke with more of the elders. Whitfield and Bennett already suspect something significant has happened, but the full council remains unaware. If the throne's reaction to you becomes common knowledge before we control how it is presented, the consequences could be difficult to manage." Elena turned to face him, her eyes steady, despite the uncertainty churning beneath the surface. "You think Damon would try to stop it?" "I think," Marcus said carefully, "that Damon is a proud man who has just made a very public decision. If he believes the throne is challenging that decision, he may see it as a threat rather than as ancient law simply doing what ancient law has always done." Elena looked back toward the grove, the shape of the throne barely visible through the trees. "Then we need to be ready before that happens." "Ready for what?" Marcus asked. Elena took a slow breath, feeling something settle firmly into place inside her, a resolve she had not fully recognized until this exact moment. "Ready to prove that whatever the throne saw in me that night was not a mistake. If this pack is going to face a choice between what tradition demands and what pride refuses to accept, I intend to be prepared when that choice arrives." Marcus studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly, a small, proud smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Your mother would be proud to hear you say that." Elena managed a faint smile of her own, though her eyes remained fixed on the grove, on the throne that had chosen to notice her in the worst hour of her life. Whatever came next, she understood now that she could no longer simply wait quietly on the sidelines. Something larger than her broken mate bond was beginning to take shape, and she intended to meet it standing tall, not as Damon's rejected mate, but as whoever she was becoming on her own. The training clearing behind Marcus's cabin had been unused for years, its wooden posts weathered gray, its packed dirt floor overgrown with stubborn patches of grass. Elena stood at its center just before dawn, her breath visible in the cold morning air, her muscles already aching from the previous day's exercises. "Again," Marcus called from the edge of the clearing. "This time, don't hold back." Elena shifted her stance, focusing inward, searching for the wolf that had lived quietly beneath her skin for as long as she could remember. It had never come easily to her, not even during her years as Luna. She had always assumed her wolf was simply gentle by nature, calm and steady rather than fierce. Now, standing here under Marcus's careful instruction, she was beginning to understand a very different truth. "Your wolf isn't gentle, Elena," Marcus said, circling her slowly. "Your wolf has been suppressed. For 3 years, you shared a bond with an alpha, whose presence naturally dominates those around him. Even without meaning to, a bond like that can quiet a wolf's instincts, especially in someone who was already inclined toward patience and restraint." "You're saying Damon held me back," Elena said, frustration creeping into her voice. "Without even trying. I'm saying the mate bond is powerful, and dominance flows in both directions whether either party intends it or not," Marcus replied. "Now that the bond is broken, your wolf is waking up from a long sleep. That waking process will not be gentle. It rarely is." Elena closed her eyes, breathing slowly, trying to reach past the exhaustion and frustration, to find whatever lay beneath. She thought of the throne, of the warmth that had spread through her chest the night she touched it. She thought of her mother, a woman she barely remembered except through the stories others told her, a Luna so respected that even now, years after her passing, people spoke her name with reverence. A low growl rumbled from somewhere deep inside her chest, foreign and unfamiliar, yet undeniably her own. "There it is," Marcus said quietly, a note of satisfaction in his voice. "Don't force it, just let it rise." Elena felt her skin prickle, felt a strange, unfamiliar strength gathering beneath her muscles. It was not violent, it was simply present, awake in a way it had never been before. She opened her eyes and found Marcus watching her with something like wonder. "Your eyes," he said. "They just shifted color, even without a full transformation. That is not a small thing, Elena. That takes years of training for most warriors to achieve, and you did it in a matter of weeks." Elena flexed her fingers, feeling the strange new sensation settle through her body. "It doesn't feel like anger," she said slowly, trying to put words to the unfamiliar experience. "It feels like waking up after sleeping for a very long time." "That is exactly what it is," Marcus said, "and it is only the beginning." Over the following days, Elena's training intensified. Marcus pushed her through exercises meant to strengthen not just her physical body, but her connection to her wolf, teaching her techniques that had fallen out of common practice, drawn from methods used by warriors generations before either of them had been born. She learned to run through the forest at speeds that left her breathless with exhilaration rather than exhaustion. She learned to sense the presence of others before they came into view, a skill that had once seemed impossible to her. "Your mother trained the same way," Marcus told her one evening, as they rested beside a small fire after a particularly grueling session. "She always said true strength wasn't about overpowering others. It was about understanding yourself so completely that nothing could shake you." "Tell me about her," Elena said softly. "I don't remember much. I was so young when she passed." Marcus was quiet for a moment, staring into the flames. Grace Voss became Luna during a difficult time for this pack. There was conflict with a neighboring territory, food shortages during a harsh winter, distrust among the pack elders, following a leadership dispute. She did not inherit an easy position, but she led with such steady wisdom that within a few years, the pack had not only recovered, but flourished beyond what anyone thought possible. "Did she ever mention the throne to you?" Elena asked. "Once," Marcus said. "Near the end of her life, she told me she had visited the grove many times over the years, always feeling its presence, but it never called to her the way it seems to have called to you. I asked her why she thought that was, and she said something I never fully understood until recently." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "She said the throne was not looking for someone who was already strong. It was looking for someone who could become strong through loss, through rejection, through being underestimated by everyone around her, and choosing to rise anyway. Elena felt her throat tighten at his words. "You think that's me?" "I think," Marcus said gently, "that the throne has waited a very long time for exactly this kind of story, and I do not believe it makes mistakes." The days continued in this rhythm, training in the mornings, quiet reflection in the evenings, small visits from Nora, and occasionally other pack members who had begun quietly seeking Elena out for advice or simple conversation. Word had not yet spread widely about the throne's reaction to her, but something in the pack's collective mood had shifted, a growing undercurrent of curiosity and quiet hope that Elena could feel, even without anyone speaking it aloud directly. One morning, nearly a month after her rejection, Elena arrived at the training clearing to find Marcus waiting with a different kind of expression on his face, more serious than his usual calm focus. "Today we test something different," he said. "What do you mean?" "I want you to attempt a full shift," Marcus said. "Not the partial changes we've practiced, a complete transformation." Elena felt a flicker of nervousness. Full shifts required not just physical control, but complete trust in one's own wolf, a surrender of sorts that she had always found difficult, even during her calmest years as Luna. "I haven't attempted a full shift in years," she admitted. "Not since before I became Luna." "Then it is past time," Marcus said simply. "Trust yourself, Elena. Your wolf has been waiting for this as long as you have." She closed her eyes, drawing on everything Marcus had taught her over the past weeks, reaching for the strength she had felt building steadily inside her. She thought of the courtyard, of Damon's indifferent eyes, of Vivian's triumphant smile. She thought of the pain, and instead of pushing it away, she let it fuel the transformation, let it become part of the strength rising within her, rather than something separate from it. The shift came suddenly, powerfully, her body reshaping itself in a rush of sensation that left her breathless. When it settled, she stood on 4 paws, her fur a deep, striking silver that seemed to catch even the faintest light and hold it. Marcus stared at her, genuine astonishment written across his weathered face. "Elena," he said softly, "do you have any idea what color your fur is?" She could not see herself, but something in his tone told her this was significant. She let out a low sound, somewhere between a question and a growl. "Silver like that has not appeared in this pack in 3 generations," Marcus said. "Your mother's fur was golden brown. Mine is simple gray. Silver was the color of the very first Lunas who sat upon that throne, back before pack history was even properly recorded. I have only read about it in old texts." Elena shifted back slowly, her human form trembling slightly from the effort, though a strange, quiet exhilaration filled her chest despite the exhaustion. "What does it mean?" "I don't know for certain," Marcus admitted. "But I believe it means whatever is happening to you is not simply about broken bonds or wounded pride. I believe it means the throne recognized something ancient in you, something that has been waiting generations to return." Elena wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly aware of how much her life had changed in the span of a single month. A rejected Luna, humiliated in front of the entire pack, was slowly becoming something else entirely, something even she did not fully understand yet. "What do we do now?" she asked. Marcus considered the question carefully before answering. "Now, we continue training, quietly and carefully. And we watch closely, because I do not believe the pack will remain stable under Vivian's leadership for much longer. When the cracks become visible to everyone, not just to those of us paying close attention, you will need to be ready. Not just physically, Elena, but ready to lead." Elena looked toward the direction of the sacred grove, invisible from where they stood but present in her mind nonetheless. A steady, patient reminder of the choice that had been made the night everything fell apart. "I am ready to try," she said quietly. "I don't know if I am ready to succeed, but I am ready to try." Marcus placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "That is exactly how every great leader begins, Elena. Your mother felt the same uncertainty once. So did every Luna who came before her. Readiness is not the absence of doubt. It is choosing to move forward despite it." As the sun rose fully over the training clearing, casting warm light across the 2 figures standing amid the quiet aftermath of transformation, neither of them could have known how soon that readiness would be tested, nor how quickly the fragile peace surrounding Vivian's new position was about to unravel. The warning horn echoed across the packlands just after midnight, sharp and urgent, pulling warriors from their beds and sending a ripple of fear through the sleeping territory. Rogue wolves had crossed the northern border, 3 of them, moving fast and aggressive through territory that had remained peaceful for nearly a decade. Vivian sat upright in bed, startled awake by the sound, her hand instinctively moving to her stomach. Beside her, Damon was already rising, pulling on his clothes with the swift efficiency of a man who had faced border threats many times before. "Stay here," he said firmly. "I need to lead the response personally." "Wait," Vivian said, her voice edged with panic. "As Luna, shouldn't I be coordinating with the healers, preparing for what happens if warriors are injured?" Damon paused at the door, glancing back at her. It was a fair question, exactly the kind of responsibility Elena would have already been handling without needing to be told. But Vivian's expression held only confusion, not readiness. "The healer's den knows what to do," Damon said, a note of impatience creeping into his voice. "You should rest. I'll return once the situation is handled." He left before she could respond, and Vivian sat alone in the dark room, her heart pounding, painfully aware that she had no idea what Luna was actually supposed to do during a crisis like this. At the healer's den, chaos had already begun to unfold. Nora and the senior healers moved quickly, preparing supplies, organizing space for potential injuries, while frightened pack members gathered outside seeking information and reassurance. Normally, during moments like this, Elena would have been present, calm and steady, offering guidance and comfort, while coordinating closely with the healers and warriors alike. Her absence was felt immediately and painfully. "Someone needs to organize the families waiting outside," Nora said to another healer, her voice tight with stress. "And we need someone to communicate with the warriors about injury counts. Where is Luna Vivian?" No one had an answer. Word soon came that Vivian remained in the Alpha's quarters, unsure of her role, unwilling to venture into the chaos without clear instruction. Word of the attack reached Elena's cottage just before dawn, carried by Colin, who arrived breathless and anxious at her door. "Elena," he said urgently, "rogue wolves crossed the northern border. The Alpha is leading the response, but the healer's den is overwhelmed, and no one knows what to do about coordinating the frightened families. I thought you might know how to help, even though it's not your place anymore." Elena did not hesitate. Whatever her official title or lack of one, the instinct to protect and organize her pack remained as strong as ever. "Take me there." Within minutes, she arrived at the healer's den, moving through the anxious crowd with the same calm authority she had always carried as Luna. She began organizing families into groups, assigning simple tasks to keep anxious hands busy, gathering blankets and water for those waiting for news of loved ones among the warriors. Nora spotted her immediately and felt a wave of relief wash over her. "Elena, thank the moon you're here," Nora said. "We didn't know what to do." "You're doing exactly what you should be doing," Elena said calmly, helping arrange supplies with practiced efficiency. "Let's just make sure everyone stays organized until the warriors return." Over the next several hours, as reports trickled in from the border, Elena remained a steady, reassuring presence, her natural authority calming the anxious crowd far more effectively than confusion or panic could have. By the time the warriors returned, having successfully driven off the rogue wolves with only minor injuries among their ranks, the healer's den was running smoothly, thanks entirely to Elena's quiet intervention. Damon arrived at the den exhausted, but relieved to find the situation well managed. He stopped short upon seeing Elena moving among the crowd, directing healers, comforting worried family members, her presence as natural and effective as it had ever been during her years as Luna. "Elena," he said, surprise evident in his voice. "You're here." She turned to face him, her expression composed but distant. "Colin came to me. The healer's den needed help, and I was available to give it. That's all this is, Alpha." Something flickered across Damon's face, an emotion he could not quite name, watching her move through the crowd with an authority that seemed even stronger than he remembered from before. "Where is Vivian?" he asked, though the question felt strange leaving his mouth in this moment. No one answered immediately, and the silence that followed spoke volumes on its own. Vivian arrived at the healer's den shortly after, having finally gathered the courage to leave the Alpha's quarters once the immediate danger had passed. She stopped abruptly upon seeing Elena at the center of the organized chaos, her expression shifting from confusion to sharp, immediate anger. "What is she doing here?" Vivian demanded, her voice cutting through the room. "I am Luna. This is my responsibility, not hers." "She was helping while you were absent," one of the senior healers said, not unkindly, but firmly, before catching herself and lowering her eyes respectfully. Vivian's face flushed with humiliation and fury. "I was ensuring the safety of my child," she snapped. "Something none of you seem to understand or respect." "No one is questioning your reasons, Luna," Elena said calmly, stepping back to give Vivian space to take charge, even though the crisis had already passed. "I only wanted to help until things were under control." Vivian's eyes narrowed, unconvinced by the polite tone, sensing correctly that Elena's calm competence in this moment had exposed something uncomfortable to everyone present. "I don't need your help," she said coldly, "and I don't want to see you interfering in pack matters again." "Vivian," Damon said, a warning edge in his voice. "No," Vivian said, turning on him now, her frustration boiling over. "She humiliates me without even trying, simply by existing, simply by knowing how to do things I haven't learned yet. How am I supposed to lead this pack if she keeps appearing every time I struggle?" Damon's jaw tightened, caught between defending Vivian and acknowledging the truth that hung heavily in the room. "This is not the place for this conversation," he said finally, his voice low. "Everyone, return to your duties. Elena, thank you for your help tonight. Vivian, come with me." Elena watched them leave, feeling a strange mixture of emotions swirling inside her, not triumph exactly, but something quieter, more complicated. She had not come here to embarrass Vivian or challenge her authority. She had come because her pack needed help, and old habits of service ran deeper than any title or rejection could erase. Later that night, as Elena walked back toward her mother's cottage under a sky scattered with stars, she found Elder Bennett waiting near the path, his expression thoughtful. "You handled tonight well," he said. "I only did what needed to be done," Elena replied. "That is precisely the point," Bennett said. "A true Luna does not need a title to know what needs to be done. Vivian has the title, yet she did not know where to begin. You have no title, and yet the entire healer's den organized itself around your presence within minutes." He paused, studying her carefully. "The council has been discussing the events at the sacred grove, Elena. More elders know now than before. I believe it is time we spoke more openly about what this means for the pack's future." Elena felt a familiar mixture of hope and apprehension settle in her chest. What happens next? "That," Bennett said, "depends greatly on how much longer the Alpha can ignore what everyone else in this pack is beginning to see clearly." He glanced back toward the direction of the Alpha's quarters, where lights still burned late into the night, the sound of a heated, muffled argument, barely audible on the evening breeze. Tonight may have been the first crack in a foundation that was never as solid as it appeared. "I suspect it will not be the last." Elena said nothing, but as she continued her walk home beneath the quiet stars, she could not shake the feeling that Bennett was right. Something had shifted tonight, subtle but undeniable, and the pack's uneasy peace was beginning, slowly and surely, to unravel. The council chamber had not held a full gathering of every elder in over a decade, yet on this cool evening, every seat around the ancient wooden table was filled. Elder Whitfield sat at the head, flanked by Bennett and several others whose names Elena knew, but whose full authority within pack law she was only beginning to understand. Marcus stood near the back of the room, arms crossed, watching carefully as Elena took the single empty chair positioned near the center of the gathering. "Thank you all for coming on short notice," Whitfield began, his voice carrying easily through the quiet chamber. "We are here to discuss a matter of significant importance to the future of this pack. Some of you have already heard rumors. Tonight, we confirm what is true." He gestured toward Elena. 3 weeks ago, following her rejection as Luna, Elena Voss visited the sacred grove and made contact with the Luna throne. The throne responded. Since then, her wolf has awakened with remarkable strength, culminating in a full shift revealing silver fur, a color not seen in this pack in 3 generations, historically associated only with the earliest Lunas recorded in our oldest texts. Murmurs rippled through the gathered elders. some skeptical, some clearly already aware, having heard whispers through the pack's growing rumor network. "This is a serious claim," said an elder Elena did not recognize, an older man with sharp eyes and a stern expression. "The throne has been dormant for generations. Are we certain this is not simply a natural strengthening of her wolf following the trauma of rejection?" "I witnessed it myself," Marcus said, stepping forward. The throne's light responded directly to her touch. "I have served this pack for over 30 years, and I have never seen the Grove react to anyone, not even Grace Voss during her time as Luna." The stern elder frowned, but did not immediately argue further. "There is an ancient law," Whitfield continued, "one that predates the current tradition of alphas naming their mates as Luna through marriage alone. According to pack records dating back over 200 years, the Luna throne holds final authority in confirming a true Luna, particularly in cases where the pack's stability is threatened by uncertainty or division." "Are you suggesting," Bennett said carefully, "that we invoke this old law now, given the current circumstances?" "I am suggesting," Whitfield said, "that we cannot responsibly ignore what has already happened. Whether we invoke the law formally or not, the throne has already reacted. Word is spreading through the pack regardless of our discretion. If we remain silent, rumor and speculation will shape the narrative instead of truth and proper guidance." Elena listened carefully, her heart pounding steadily, as the elders debated back and forth, weighing tradition against the delicate political reality of challenging an alpha's recent, very public decision. She understood the stakes clearly now, understood that whatever happened in this room tonight would ripple outward through every corner of the pack's future. "What does Elena herself wish to happen?" asked a quieter elder near the back, a woman named Elder Voss, distantly related to Elena's late mother, whose expression held a mixture of curiosity and cautious hope. All eyes turned toward Elena. She rose slowly from her chair, choosing her words with care. "I did not seek this," she said honestly. "I went to the Grove that night simply to grieve, not to challenge anyone's authority or seek power I had just lost. But I cannot deny what happened when I touched the throne, and I cannot pretend the past weeks have not changed something fundamental within me." She paused, meeting the eyes of each elder in turn. "I only wish for this pack to be led well, by whoever is truly capable of doing so. If the throne believes that person is me, I will not run from that responsibility. But I also will not force a claim that isn't rightfully mine. Whatever ancient law exists, I trust it to reveal the truth, not simply grant me power because I wish to have it back." A thoughtful silence settled over the chamber following her words. Even the stern, skeptical elder seemed to soften slightly, studying her with newfound consideration. "Well spoken," Whitfield said quietly. "That, more than anything else, tells me the throne did not make an error." The council continued discussing logistics late into the night, careful strategy around how and when to formally approach Damon with the situation, how to manage the delicate balance between respecting the Alpha's authority and honoring ancient law that technically superseded even his decisions in matters concerning the Luna position. No firm decisions were reached that evening, but by the time Elena left the chamber, she understood that the wheels of something much larger than herself had officially begun turning. Meanwhile, tension within the Alpha's quarters had reached a breaking point of its own. Vivian, still humiliated by the Healer's Den incident, had grown increasingly demanding and volatile in the weeks since, snapping at servants, dismissing council suggestions she found inconvenient, and growing visibly frustrated by comparisons to Elena that seemed to follow her, no matter how hard she tried to establish her own authority. "They still speak her name more than mine," Vivian complained one evening, pacing the length of their private quarters while Damon sat quietly, reviewing border reports he was struggling to focus on. Every meeting, every gathering, someone mentions how Elena would have handled things differently. "It's suffocating." "They will adjust in time," Damon said, though his voice lacked conviction even to his own ears. "Will they?" Vivian snapped. "Because it has been over a month, Damon, and I still feel like an outsider in my own home." Damon set down the reports, rubbing his temples wearily. The weight of leadership, combined with growing whispers about the sacred grove that had reached even his own ears, despite the council's discretion, had left him increasingly on edge. "What would you have me do, Vivian?" "I made my choice. I cannot simply erase Elena's years of service from everyone's memory. You could remind the pack that I am carrying your child, Vivian said sharply. That should matter more than years of service from a woman who could not even give you an heir. The words hung heavy and sharp in the air. Damon's expression darkened, something protective and defensive flickering behind his eyes that surprised even him. Elena's inability to conceive was never something she controlled, Vivian. Do not speak of her that way in my presence. Vivian froze, startled by the sudden edge in his voice, a rare defense of Elena that neither of them had expected him to offer. I apologize, she said quickly, though her tone carried more calculation than genuine remorse. I only meant that perhaps if the pack understood the full picture, they would stop comparing us so unfairly. Damon said nothing further, returning his attention to the reports in front of him, though his mind remained elsewhere, troubled by thoughts he could not fully articulate even to himself. Something about the growing unease within the pack felt different than simple resistance to change. It felt like the early tremors before something much larger shifted beneath the surface, and despite his authority as alpha, he was beginning to sense that this particular storm might be entirely beyond his ability to control. Word of the Sacred Grove's reaction to Elena reached his ears formally 3 days later, delivered carefully by Elder Whitfield during a private audience Damon had not anticipated needing. The Luna throne has responded to Elena Voss, Whitfield said plainly, watching Damon's reaction closely. The full council has confirmed this through direct witness testimony and Elena's own transformation, which several senior pack members have now observed personally. Damon sat in stunned silence for a long moment, processing the weight of what he was hearing. You're telling me ancient law might override my decision regarding Luna succession? I am telling you, Whitfield said carefully, that this pack's stability depends on how thoughtfully we handle what has already occurred, regardless of anyone's personal feelings on the matter, including yours, including Elena's, including Vivian's. Damon rose from his seat, pacing toward the window, staring out at the packlands he had sworn to protect and lead wisely. Pride warred fiercely within him against a growing, uncomfortable awareness that perhaps his decision, made in haste and guilt weeks earlier, had not been the wisest choice for his people's future. What happens now? He asked quietly, more to himself than to Whitfield. Now, Whitfield said, the council believes a formal ritual should take place, allowing the throne to confirm its choice openly, before the entire pack, removing all doubt or rumor from the matter entirely. Damon closed his eyes briefly, feeling the weight of an impossible decision settling heavily onto his shoulders. Whatever pride or stubbornness remained within him, he understood now that ignoring ancient law risked far greater instability than confronting it directly, no matter how uncomfortable the outcome might prove to be. Arrange it, he said finally, his voice heavy with reluctant acceptance. Let the throne speak, once and for all. Whitfield bowed respectfully and left the room, leaving Damon alone with his thoughts, staring out over the territory he had led confidently for years, now facing a challenge to his authority, unlike anything he had ever encountered before. One rooted not in rebellion or rival packs, but in an ancient truth he could no longer afford to ignore. News of the formal ritual spread through the packlands within days, and with it came a fresh wave of curiosity, speculation, and quiet anxiety. Vivian, upon hearing the announcement from Damon himself, felt something cold and sharp settle deep in her stomach, a fear she worked hard to hide behind practiced composure. A ritual to confirm the throne's choice, she repeated slowly, watching Damon's face carefully. You are allowing this. I am not allowing anything, Damon said tiredly. Ancient law exists whether I permit it or not, Vivian. Ignoring it would only create greater instability. If the throne truly has chosen Elena, better to know clearly now than to let doubt fester indefinitely. Vivian forced a calm expression, though her mind raced beneath the surface. She had worked too hard, planned too carefully, to lose everything now to an old legend she had never taken seriously until this very moment. And if the throne chooses me instead, she asked carefully, has anyone considered that possibility? Damon studied her for a long moment. The council will decide how the ritual proceeds. I trust their judgment in matters of ancient law. After he left the room, Vivian remained alone, her hands trembling slightly as she pressed them against her stomach, feeling the child within her. the child she had believed would secure her future completely. She had not anticipated this complication, had never imagined that Elena's quiet dignity in the face of rejection would somehow translate into a legitimate, ancient challenge to everything Vivian had worked toward. She needed information. She needed to understand exactly what this ritual would require, and more importantly, whether there was any way to influence its outcome in her favor. Meanwhile, Elena and Marcus had begun a different kind of preparation entirely. While the council focused on logistics for the formal ceremony, Marcus had grown increasingly troubled by something he could not quite articulate, a nagging instinct built from decades of experience reading people and situations others often overlooked. "Something about Vivian's arrival in this pack has always felt incomplete to me," he admitted to Elena one evening, as they sat together outside her mother's cottage, the sacred grove visible in the distance beneath a darkening sky. She appeared nearly 2 years ago, claiming to be a distant relative of a neighboring pack, seeking refuge after some vague family conflict. No one ever verified those details closely. "You think she lied about her background," Elena said slowly. "I think," Marcus said carefully, "that if the throne is preparing to reject her formally, it would help to understand exactly why, beyond simple worthiness. Bloodline matters greatly in matters of Luna succession. If Vivian's claims about her heritage are false, that alone could explain the throne's silence in her presence, regardless of the child she carries." Elena considered this carefully. "How would we find out the truth?" "I have contacts among the neighboring packs," Marcus said. "Old friends from my years of service, warriors and elders, who might remember details about Vivian's family that she has conveniently left out of her own account." He paused. "It will take time, and discretion. If Vivian learns we are investigating her background before we have solid answers, she may take steps to protect herself that make the truth even harder to uncover." Elena nodded, understanding the delicate balance required. "Then let's move carefully." Over the following week, Marcus traveled quietly to neighboring territories, meeting with old contacts under the guise of simple social visits, carefully steering conversations toward topics that might reveal useful information without raising suspicion. Elena remained at the Packlands, continuing her training and her quiet involvement in Healer's Den activities, careful not to draw undue attention to herself during this sensitive period. It was during a visit to the Ashford Pack, nearly 3 days' journey from Blackthorn territory, that Marcus finally uncovered something significant. An elderly healer there, a woman named Constance, who had served the Ashford Pack for over 50 years, recognized Vivian's description immediately upon Marcus's careful inquiry. "Vivian Marsh," Constance said, her expression darkening with old memory. "I remember that name well, though I have not heard it spoken in many years." "You knew her family?" Marcus asked carefully. "I knew of them," Constance said. "The Marsh family was exiled from proper pack lineage nearly 3 generations ago. Vivian's grandmother was discovered to carry mixed heritage, part wolf, part something else entirely, details that were never fully explained, even at the time. The family was stripped of formal pack status and forced to live on the margins of wolf society ever since." Marcus felt a chill run through him at this revelation. "Mixed heritage. You mean she is not a full-blooded wolf?" "I mean," Constance said carefully, "that whatever runs through Vivian Marsh's bloodline, it has never been fully wolf, not for at least 3 generations. Such heritage was once considered deeply significant in matters of pack leadership, disqualifying entirely from positions like Luna, which traditionally required pure bloodline to properly connect with pack magic and ancient ritual." "Does Vivian know this about her own family?" Marcus asked. "I could not say for certain," Constance admitted. "Many families in her position worked hard to hide such history, ashamed of the exile, desperate for their descendants to build normal lives elsewhere, without the burden of that stigma following them. It is entirely possible Vivian grew up with only vague, incomplete knowledge of her true heritage, or perhaps none at all." Marcus thanked Constance for her honesty and made the long journey back to Blackthorn territory with much to consider. If Vivian's bloodline truly disqualified her from ever properly connecting with the Luna throne, that would explain everything: the throne's silence in her presence, her inability to sense pack members' emotions the way a true Luna instinctively could, the strange disconnect that so many pack members had noticed without fully understanding why. He shared his findings with Elena immediately upon returning, watching her expression carefully as she absorbed the implications. "If this is true," Elena said slowly, "it changes everything about tomorrow's ritual. It would mean the throne's rejection of Vivian isn't simply about her actions or character. It's about something she perhaps never even knew about herself." "Which raises a difficult question," Marcus said. "Do we share this information before the ritual, giving everyone fair warning and understanding? Or do we allow the throne to speak for itself, without our interference shaping the outcome unfairly?" Elena considered this carefully, weighing compassion against practicality. Whatever Vivian's actions had been since arriving in the pack, however cruel or manipulative her behavior had grown, the revelation of hidden family exile and mixed heritage was not something she had chosen for herself. It felt wrong somehow to weaponize that painful truth simply to secure victory. "I think," Elena said finally, "that we should share what we know with the council privately, before the ritual, not to humiliate Vivian publicly, but to ensure everyone understands the full context of whatever happens tomorrow. If the throne rejects her, the pack deserves to understand why, clearly and compassionately, rather than through cruel speculation or rumor." Marcus nodded, respecting her judgment. "That is a wise approach, Elena. Your mother would have handled it exactly the same way." The following morning, Marcus and Elena met privately with Elder Whitfield and Elder Bennett, sharing Constance's account carefully and completely. Both elders listened with grave, thoughtful expressions, understanding immediately the significance of what they had learned. "This explains a great deal," Whitfield said quietly, once Marcus had finished. "I suspected something was amiss regarding Vivian's connection to pack magic, but I had not considered heritage as the underlying cause." "Should we inform the Alpha before the ceremony?" Bennett asked. "I believe we must," Whitfield said. "Regardless of how difficult that conversation proves to be, Damon deserves to understand the full truth before standing before his entire pack tomorrow evening." Elena's stomach tightened at the thought of Damon learning this information, of watching him process yet another painful revelation regarding the woman he had chosen over her. Despite everything that had happened between them, some small part of her still ached at the thought of causing him further pain, even indirectly. "I will speak with him," Whitfield offered gently, seeming to sense her discomfort. "You need not be present for that conversation, Elena. Focus instead on preparing yourself for tomorrow. Whatever happens with Vivian's heritage, the throne's judgment regarding your own worthiness remains the true purpose of this ceremony." Elena nodded gratefully, though the weight of tomorrow's uncertain outcome pressed heavily upon her as she made her way back toward her mother's cottage that evening. Whatever truth emerged about Vivian's hidden past, Elena understood clearly now that tomorrow would mark a turning point far greater than any single revelation, a moment that would determine not just her own future, but the future stability and direction of the entire pack she had devoted her life to serving. As she settled in for a restless night's sleep, her thoughts drifted toward the sacred grove, toward the ancient throne waiting patiently beneath the stars, for the ceremony that would finally reveal its true intentions before the entire pack, once and for all. Damon sat motionlessly for a long time after Elder Whitfield finished speaking, the weight of the revelation settling over him like a heavy fog. Mixed heritage, exile, a family history hidden for 3 generations. He thought of Vivian's confident smile the night she had announced her pregnancy, the certainty in her voice as she claimed her rightful place as Luna. Had she known the truth about her own bloodline, or had she genuinely believed herself simply another wolf among many? "Are you certain of this information?" he asked finally, his voice low and controlled despite the turmoil beneath the surface. Marcus Hale spoke directly with an elder healer in Ashford territory, who remembered the Marsh family exile clearly, Whitfield said. "I have no reason to doubt her account. The details align too precisely with patterns we have already observed in Vivian's inability to connect properly with pack magic and ancient tradition." Damon rose from his seat and walked to the window, staring out at the darkening sky without truly seeing it. "I need to speak with her myself before tomorrow's ceremony." "That is your right as Alpha," Whitfield said gently. "I only ask that whatever you decide, you allow the ritual to proceed as planned. The pack needs clarity, Damon, regardless of how uncomfortable that clarity proves to be for any of us personally." Damon nodded silently, and Whitfield took his leave, sensing correctly that the Alpha needed time alone to process everything he had just learned. He found Vivian in their private quarters an hour later, seated near the window, one hand resting protectively over her stomach, as she stared out at the same darkening sky he had studied earlier. She turned as he entered, immediately sensing something troubled in his expression. "What is it?" she asked, setting down the book she had been pretending to read. "Tell me about your family, Vivian," Damon said quietly. "Tell me about the Marsh lineage, and why your grandmother's family was exiled from Proper Pack standing 3 generations ago." Vivian's face went pale, all pretense of calm composure draining away in an instant. "Where did you hear such a thing?" "Is it true?" Damon pressed, his voice hardening slightly. Vivian's hands trembled as she rose from her seat, pacing anxiously across the room. "I did not know the full details until I was already grown," she admitted finally, her voice tight with old shame and fresh panic. "My mother spoke of it only once, vaguely, before she passed. She said our family carried something different in our blood, something that made Proper Pack life difficult for her parents. I never understood exactly what that meant. I certainly never imagined it would matter this much." "It explains why the throne has never responded to you," Damon said, the words heavy with implications neither of them wanted to fully confront. "It explains the disconnect the entire pack has noticed since you became Luna." "So what does that mean?" Vivian demanded, fear sharpening into anger. "That I am somehow unworthy, simply because of something my grandmother's family experienced generations before I was even born? That is not fair, Damon. I have done nothing wrong." "No one is saying you did anything wrong," Damon said, though his voice lacked the conviction to fully reassure her. "But tomorrow's ceremony will reveal the truth, regardless of what either of us wishes to believe. I cannot protect you from ancient law, Vivian, no matter how much I might wish to." Vivian's eyes filled with furious, frightened tears. "And what of our child? What happens to my place in this pack if the throne rejects me tomorrow, in front of everyone?" Damon hesitated, the question striking at something he had not fully considered until this exact moment. "Our child will always have a place here," he said carefully. "That much I promise you, regardless of what happens with the Luna title. But I cannot promise you the throne's approval, Vivian. That is beyond my control entirely." Vivian turned away from him, her shoulders shaking with barely suppressed emotion, torn between genuine fear and calculating desperation. She had built her entire future around securing the Luna position, and now, on the eve of a ceremony she could not control or influence, everything she had worked toward felt suddenly, terrifyingly fragile. That night, unable to sleep, Vivian made a decision born from desperation rather than clear thinking. She rose quietly before dawn and made her way toward the healer's den, seeking out Nora, whom she knew had remained closely connected to Elena throughout the recent weeks. "I need to speak with Elena," Vivian said, her voice tight with forced calm as she found Nora preparing morning supplies. Privately, before the ceremony. Nora studied her carefully, surprised by the request, but sensing genuine desperation beneath Vivian's composed exterior. "I will ask if she is willing to meet with you." Elena agreed to the meeting, curious despite herself about what Vivian could possibly wish to discuss on the very morning of the ceremony that would determine both their futures. They met in the quiet garden behind the healer's den, the early morning air cool and still around them. "I know what you and Marcus discovered about my family," Vivian said without preamble, her voice tight with barely controlled emotion. "Damon told me everything last night." Elena said nothing, waiting to hear what Vivian intended by requesting this meeting. "I want you to understand something," Vivian continued, her eyes hard despite the vulnerability trembling beneath her words. "I did not choose the circumstances of my birth any more than you chose to be unable to give Damon a child. We are both, in our own ways, victims of circumstances beyond our control. I have never blamed you for your heritage, Vivian," Elena said quietly, "if that is truly what you came here to discuss." "Then what do you want from me?" Vivian snapped, frustration finally breaking through her careful composure. "You could destroy me completely today, in front of the entire pack, and something tells me you have every reason to want exactly that, after everything I've done to humiliate you." Elena considered her words carefully before responding. "I did not seek this confrontation, Vivian. I never wanted to destroy you, or take satisfaction in your downfall, regardless of how you have treated me since the rejection ceremony. Whatever happens today will happen because ancient law demands truth, not because I have engineered your humiliation out of spite." Vivian studied her for a long moment, searching for insincerity and finding none. "Why does that make this so much harder to accept?" she said quietly, almost to herself. "Because deep down," Elena said gently, "I think you already suspected the truth about your connection to this pack, long before Marcus uncovered your family's history. The throne's silence toward you was never really about hidden secrets, Vivian. It was simply confirming something you already felt, but refused to acknowledge." Tears welled in Vivian's eyes, and for the first time since Elena had known her, the careful mask of confident cruelty slipped away entirely, revealing something far more fragile and human underneath. "What happens to me if the throne rejects me today?" she whispered. "What happens to my child?" "Your child will always be Damon's, regardless of any ceremony," Elena said. "And you will always have a place in this pack, even if that place is not the one you originally sought. Whatever happens today does not have to be the end of your story, Vivian. It simply means your story will take a different path than the one you imagined." Vivian wiped her eyes quickly, straightening her shoulders with visible effort. "I don't know if I can accept that gracefully," she admitted. "But I suppose I have little choice in the matter now." The two women stood together in silence for a long moment, an uneasy, but genuine understanding passing between them, born not from friendship, but from a shared recognition of how complicated and painful this entire situation had become for everyone involved. As the sun rose fully over the packlands, word spread quickly that the ceremony would begin at sunset, drawing every member of the Blackthorn pack toward the sacred grove, for the first time in generations. Whatever truths remained hidden, whatever fears and hopes each person carried into that gathering, all understood clearly that tonight would mark a turning point from which there would be no returning to the uncertain, uneasy peace that had defined the past month. Elena spent the remaining hours of daylight in quiet preparation, meditating beside the small garden at her mother's cottage, drawing strength from memories of her mother's steady wisdom, from Marcus's careful guidance, from the quiet support of pack members like Nora and Colin, who had never stopped believing in her worth, even during her darkest moments of humiliation and doubt. Whatever the throne revealed tonight, she understood now that she had already grown into someone stronger than the woman who had walked away from that courtyard in tears a month before. Regardless of the ceremony's outcome, that transformation alone felt like a victory no rejection could ever fully take from her again. By sunset, the sacred grove had transformed into something Elena had never imagined witnessing in her lifetime. Hundreds of pack members gathered among the ancient trees, torches lighting the clearing in warm, flickering gold, their combined presence filling a space that had known only silence and solitude for generations. Elder Whitfield stood near the throne itself, flanked by the full council, while warriors maintained a respectful perimeter around the historic gathering. Elena arrived wearing simple gray, deliberately avoiding the ceremonial finery that might have suggested she was assuming victory before the throne had spoken. Marcus walked beside her, his presence steady and reassuring as they approached the edge of the clearing, where the crowd parted respectfully to let them through. Damon stood near the throne already, his expression carefully neutral, though the tension in his shoulders betrayed the weight of the evening pressing down upon him. Vivian stood beside him, dressed simply as well, her hand resting protectively over her stomach, her chin lifted with forced dignity, despite the fear Elena could sense radiating from her. "Pack of Blackthorn," Whitfield announced, his voice carrying clearly through the hushed clearing. "Tonight, we witness something that has not occurred in 3 generations. The Luna throne will confirm, before all of us, the truth of its judgment regarding the rightful Luna of this pack." A ripple of anticipation moved through the crowd, hundreds of eyes fixed on the ancient stone throne at the center of the grove, its carved symbols dark and still in the torchlight, waiting. "Ancient law dictates that both candidates approach the throne in turn," Whitfield continued. "The throne's response, or absence of response, will reveal its judgment clearly to all present." Vivian stepped forward first, her hands trembling slightly despite her efforts to appear composed. She approached the throne slowly, the crowd watching in complete silence as she reached out and placed her palm against the cold stone surface. Nothing happened. The throne remained dark, silent, utterly unresponsive to her touch. Vivian stood there for a long, agonizing moment, hoping desperately for some flicker of light, some sign that she had misunderstood the situation, but the stone beneath her palm remained as lifeless as it had been for generations before this night. Finally, she withdrew her hand, her face flushing with humiliation as murmurs spread through the watching crowd. "The throne does not recognize her," Whitfield said quietly, though his words carried clearly through the silent grove. "Step back, Vivian. Let us proceed." Vivian retreated on unsteady legs, moving to stand near the edge of the gathering, her earlier composure completely shattered, replaced by raw, visible heartbreak that even those who had disliked her found difficult to witness without sympathy. Elena stepped forward next, her heart pounding steadily in her chest, despite her outward calm. The crowd watched with breathless anticipation as she approached the ancient stone, the same throne that had first responded to her grief a month earlier, in a moment of private despair she never imagined would lead to this public reckoning. She reached out and placed her palm against the cold surface. The response was immediate and undeniable. Light bloomed instantly along every carved symbol, spreading rapidly across the entire throne in a brilliant wave of golden radiance that illuminated the entire grove, casting Elena's face in warm, glowing light. Gasps of astonishment rippled through the crowd, followed quickly by a swelling wave of awed murmurs and, from many corners of the gathering, spontaneous cheers of celebration. The light did not fade this time, as it had during her first encounter. Instead, it grew steadily brighter, pulsing in rhythm with what felt like a heartbeat, ancient and powerful, recognizing something in Elena that went beyond simple bloodline or circumstance. Symbols she had never noticed before became clearly visible along the throne's surface, ancient script that seemed to shimmer and shift, forming patterns that even the eldest members of the council struggled to fully interpret. "The throne has chosen," Whitfield announced, his voice thick with emotion as he raised his hands toward the glowing stone. "Elena Voss is confirmed, by ancient law and undeniable truth, as the rightful Luna of the Blackthorn Pack." The clearing erupted into celebration, warriors raising their voices in approval, pack members embracing one another with relief and joy that had been building quietly for weeks, beneath the surface of forced acceptance and uncertain loyalty. Colin let out a triumphant shout, pumping his fist toward the sky, while Nora wept openly, overcome with emotion, at finally seeing her mentor's worth properly recognized. Damon stood frozen near the throne, watching the golden light illuminate Elena's face, watching hundreds of his pack members celebrate a truth that had been hidden from him through his own pride and hasty decisions weeks earlier. Something complicated and painful shifted behind his eyes, regret mixing with genuine awe at witnessing ancient magic confirm what so many around him had apparently already sensed, long before he was willing to accept it himself. Elena withdrew her hand slowly as the light gradually softened, though it did not disappear entirely, settling instead into a steady, gentle glow that seemed to acknowledge her permanently now, rather than simply reacting to a single moment of contact. She turned to face the crowd, overwhelmed by the weight of what had just occurred, by the visible relief and joy reflected in so many familiar faces. "This does not happen by accident," Whitfield said, addressing the crowd once more, as the celebration gradually settled into attentive silence. "Ancient law is clear. The throne's confirmation cannot be overturned by personal preference or prior declaration. Elena Voss is Luna, not through marriage or Alpha's decree, but through a right recognized by this pack's oldest traditions, older even than the current customs many of us have grown accustomed to following." Damon finally stepped forward, his expression difficult to read, a complicated mixture of humility, regret, and something that looked almost like relief despite the blow to his pride. He approached Elena slowly, the crowd watching intently as he stopped before her. "I made a decision weeks ago that I believed was right," he said, his voice carrying just far enough for those nearby to hear clearly. "I see now how wrong I was, not simply about the throne's judgment, but about everything that led me to that decision in the first place." Elena studied him carefully, feeling the echo of old pain mixed with a strange, distant sense of closure. "The throne's judgment is not about punishing you, Damon," she said quietly. "It is about restoring balance to this pack. balance that was disrupted the moment you chose pride and guilt over patience and truth. "What happens now?" Damon asked, genuine uncertainty coloring his voice for perhaps the first time since Elena had known him. "Now," Elena said, turning to address not just Damon, but the assembled crowd surrounding them, "I intend to serve this pack as its rightful Luna, exactly as ancient law and this throne have confirmed tonight. Whatever complications exist between us personally, Damon, my responsibility to these people comes first, as it always has." A fresh wave of approval rippled through the crowd at her words, warriors and healers alike nodding with visible respect at the steady conviction in her voice. Even Vivian, standing quietly at the edge of the gathering, found herself unable to deny the quiet strength radiating from the woman who had once stood in her exact position of uncertainty and fear, only to rise from rejection into something far greater than either of them had anticipated. As the ceremony drew to its natural conclusion, and pack members began slowly dispersing back toward their homes, still buzzing with excited conversation about the historic events they had just witnessed, Elena remained near the glowing throne for a long moment, feeling the weight of everything that had changed since that painful night a month earlier. She thought of the courtyard, of Damon's indifferent eyes, of Vivian's triumphant smile that had since crumbled into genuine heartbreak. She thought of Marcus's patient guidance, of her mother's legacy finally understood in its full context, of the silver wolf that had emerged from beneath years of quiet suppression to reveal a strength Elena had never fully recognized within herself. Whatever challenges awaited her as Luna, confirmed not by marriage but by ancient truth witnessed before her entire pack, Elena understood clearly now that her story was no longer defined by rejection or humiliation. It was defined instead by resilience, by growth born from pain, and by a strength that no single person, not even the alpha who had once cast her aside, could ever again take from her. 3 months passed since the ceremony in the sacred grove, and the Blackthorn pack had transformed in ways few could have predicted on that historic evening. Elena moved through her days as Luna, with the same quiet competence that had once defined her before the rejection, though something steadier and more assured now shaped every decision she made, a confidence born not from a title granted by marriage, but from ancient confirmation of her own inherent worth. The morning sun rose warm over the training grounds where Elena stood reviewing patrol assignments with a group of senior warriors, including Colin, who had been promoted to lead a border unit, following his steady loyalty during the difficult weeks of transition. The pack had settled into a new rhythm under her leadership, one marked by careful attention to every member's well-being, from the youngest pups learning their first shifts to the eldest members requiring additional care during harsh seasons. "The northern border remains quiet," Colin reported, unrolling a map across the wooden table. "No further sign of rogue activity since the incident months ago." "Good," Elena said, studying the details carefully. "Continue regular patrols, but ease back the emergency protocols we implemented afterward. I don't want our warriors exhausted from unnecessary vigilance." Colin nodded, making note of her instructions before glancing up with a small, genuine smile. "It's good to see the pack running smoothly again, Luna. Everyone feels it, even if they don't always say it directly." Elena returned his smile warmly, grateful for moments like these that reminded her how far the pack had come since those uncertain, painful weeks following her rejection. She dismissed the warriors to their duties and made her way toward the healer's den, where Nora had recently been promoted to senior healer, a position she had earned through years of dedication that Elena had always recognized, even when others overlooked her quiet contributions. "Luna," Nora greeted warmly as Elena entered, "we've finished restocking the winter supplies ahead of schedule this year." "Wonderful news," Elena said, genuinely pleased. "You've done excellent work organizing everything, Nora. This pack is fortunate to have you." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Elder Bennett, who approached with news that made Elena pause mid-sentence. "Luna, a delegation has arrived from the Ashford territory," Bennett said. "They wish to discuss a formal alliance, strengthening trade and mutual defense agreements between our packs." Elena felt a familiar surge of purposeful energy at the prospect of new diplomatic responsibility. "Arrange a meeting for this afternoon. I want to understand their full proposal before we commit to anything." As Bennett departed to make arrangements, Elena reflected briefly on how naturally these responsibilities had settled onto her shoulders once again, how the ancient confirmation of the throne had done more than simply restore her title. It had restored her sense of purpose, her belief that her years of dedicated service had never truly been wasted, regardless of how painfully they had once been dismissed. Across the Packlands, Damon had spent the intervening months navigating his own complicated journey of reflection and quiet humility. Stripped of his authority over Luna's succession by ancient law he could not overturn, he had been forced to confront, repeatedly and uncomfortably, the consequences of decisions made hastily under the weight of guilt and pride. He no longer held sole authority over pack governance, the council having established new protocols ensuring Luna and Alpha shared decision-making more equally, following the historic events in the Sacred Grove. He found Elena one afternoon, reviewing trade proposals in the small study that had once belonged to her mother, now repurposed as an official Luna workspace separate from the Alpha's quarters, a change Elena had insisted upon during the early weeks of reorganizing pack governance. "May I speak with you?" Damon asked from the doorway, his tone considerably more humble than the confident authority he had once carried without question. Elena looked up from her papers, studying him carefully. Their relationship since the ceremony had settled into something professional and respectful, though the old warmth they had once shared as mates remained permanently altered, a casualty of choices that could not simply be undone by ancient magic or public confirmation of her worth. "Of course," she said, gesturing toward the chair across from her desk. Damon sat down slowly, choosing his words with visible care. "I wanted to thank you properly," he said, "for how you've handled everything since the ceremony. You could have used your position to punish me, to make my life difficult out of understandable resentment for what I put you through. Instead, you've led this pack with the same integrity you always showed, even toward those who wronged you." Elena considered his words carefully. "Vengeance was never something I wanted, Damon. I only ever wanted to serve this pack well, and to be recognized fairly for that service. The throne gave me that recognition. I don't need anything else from you to feel whole again." Damon nodded, though something wistful flickered behind his eyes. "Do you think," he asked hesitantly, "that we might ever find our way back to what we once had?" Elena met his gaze steadily, feeling the question settle honestly within her, rather than triggering the old ache it might have caused months earlier. "I don't know," she said truthfully. "I have grown into someone different since that night in the courtyard, Damon. Someone stronger, more certain of my own worth, independent of anyone else's approval, including yours. I care about this pack's stability, and that includes maintaining a respectful, functional relationship between us as Luna and Alpha. But I cannot promise you that what we once shared can simply be rebuilt as though nothing happened." "I understand," Damon said quietly, though disappointment colored his voice. "I suppose I deserve nothing less than your honesty, even when it's difficult to hear." "You deserve the chance to rebuild trust, if that's truly what you want," Elena said gently. "Not through grand gestures or desperate attempts to erase the past, but through consistent, patient effort over time. Whether that leads us back to what we once shared, or simply toward a respectful partnership in leading this pack together, I cannot say for certain. But I am willing to see where honest effort leads us, if you are prepared to offer that." Damon felt something loosen slightly in his chest at her words. Not quite relief, but something adjacent to hope, tempered realistically by understanding of everything that remained uncertain between them. "I am prepared," he said simply. "Whatever form our future takes, I want to earn back even a fraction of the respect I threw away so carelessly." As for Vivian, her path had taken an unexpected turn following the ceremony's dramatic conclusion. Rather than leaving the pack entirely, as many had assumed she might, following her public rejection by the throne, she had instead approached Elena privately, several weeks after the ceremony, requesting an opportunity to remain within the Packlands, in a role suited to her actual strengths, rather than a title she had never truly been equipped to hold. Elena, remembering the fragile vulnerability she had witnessed during their private conversation before the ceremony, had granted her that opportunity, and Vivian had surprised many, including herself, by finding genuine fulfillment overseeing the pack's growing trade relationships, work that suited her sharp intelligence and attention to detail, far better than the emotional and instinctive demands of Luna leadership ever had. Her child, A daughter born just weeks after the ceremony was welcomed warmly into the Pack community, growing up surrounded by extended family and support regardless of the complicated circumstances of her birth. Elena made a point of ensuring the child never felt the weight of adult conflicts that had preceded her arrival, understanding deeply that innocence deserved protection, regardless of how complicated the path leading to it had been. As autumn settled fully over the Packlands, painting the forest in brilliant shades of gold and crimson, Elena stood once more at the edge of the sacred grove, watching the ancient throne glow softly in the fading afternoon light, a permanent, gentle reminder of the truth it had confirmed months earlier. She thought of the woman she had been that painful night in the courtyard, humiliated and broken, uncertain whether she would ever find her footing again. That woman felt distant now, replaced by someone forged through resilience and quiet strength, someone who had learned that worth was never truly dependent on another person's approval or choice, but on the steady, consistent character built through years of genuine service and integrity. Whatever the future held, whether reconciliation with Damon eventually blossomed into something renewed, or whether her path continued forward, as an independent, capable leader standing firmly on her own, Elena understood with complete certainty that she would face it exactly as she had faced everything since that fateful night. With dignity, with strength, and with the unwavering knowledge that her value had never depended on anyone else's recognition, only on her own steady commitment to becoming the person she was always meant to be. The wind moved gently through the sacred grove as the sun began its slow descent toward the horizon, carrying with it the quiet promise of tomorrow, and all the tomorrows still waiting to unfold, for the Luna the ancient throne had rightfully, undeniably chosen.